My experience of Vladimir Sorokin has come in waves. The first wave, after stumbling on the Ice trilogy in a store as the darkest, thickest book on the front table, was thinking I'd found the sci-fi word freak I'd been looking for since an early year spent reading all of Burroughs and Cormac McCarthy back to back. Macabre and violent, yes, but oddly sparkling, full of ideas that touched our world and then another like a pinball. I knew at once I needed more, but why wasn't there more of his work in print in English? Why do we always have to wait so long to get the good shit? As if my machine could read my mind, I began receiving emails from what was then a stranger named Max Lawton, who introduced himself alongside a slew of Sorokin's manuscripts he'd been translating. "You're in for a treat," he guaranteed, oozing enthusiasm like a disease he knew I'd shortly catch. He mentioned Blue Lard in particular, a novel I'd later learned represented a major shift in the author's life and brought forth persecution by the Russian government under charges of distribution of pornography and causing riots. Yes, indeed, I thought, this was the man for me. A real motherfucker, clearly, fearless and unreservedly ambitious too, as could be confirmed immediately from even just scrolling through the manuscript. Pages of piles of beats and riff like Ornette Coleman or Kathy Acker or Samuel Delaney or yes, Ulysses, but also none of those at all. More so a big balls post-Deleuzian buffet brain for whom the conceit of styles and forms were merely puppets, to be shredded and then immediately replaced, making up words, mincing up grammar, dragging new ideas onto the old before there's time to sort anything out, plying horny satire with made-up text speak, which sometimes would condense back into more familiar formal scenes, somehow even more sarcastic and bizarre for wanting to try to be traditional. Sorokin seemed to care less about whether I or anybody else could tell what was going on than he did making sure I'd never forget how it felt, which among the blur of gore and tedium of popular media's monopoly of manufactured parables and revelations felt like a godsend, never mind why. The second wave of my reading Sorokin began with realizing that Blue Lard was far more than the furor surrounding it let on. That underneath the spastic headspace and the sheer heat of his volition to dismantle and disown most any idea on the page, there was a way of speaking where it finally sounded like someone was really speaking straight into me. A guy behind the guy behind the guy using his tricks and sick jokes to turn his screws into the part of me that craved pure entertainment while at the same time defragging the soul entrapped beneath that, feeding it crumbs and petting its head. There are books that handle stories, and there are manuals, and there are hymnals. Then there are contraptions made of language that change the way the world's shape is because they can't otherwise figure out how to fit them in it. Blue Lard seems sick to death and pleased as punched at once of its own madness, of already knowing far too well of its abuse, refusing to use light as counterbalance against dark, and instead calling forth for further dark and hilarity, even less pretense of sense. Yes, this was realistic realism finally. Not in the dead way that we ask babies to learn to see themselves in the mirror and coo and smile, but as a filter for the unsayable and the smoldering. Merging with nothingness is peaceful oblivion, wrote H.P. Lovecraft. But to be aware of existence and yet to know that one is no longer a definite being distinguished from other beings, that is the nameless summit of agony and dread. Instead of trying to convince me or even itself that we should change or otherwise should lie down in the mud and cover our heads and wait for the nails, the drugs, the bomb, the fresh air of finally seeing someone stand up and puke with such illustrious and unlimited finesse, reflecting how often it feels to live while also tearing it apart. Well, the third wave came in reading everything I could get my hands on of Sorokin's. Suddenly in no short supply, thanks to the Sorokineissance currently in progress, thanks to Max Lawton, spanning more than 40 years of novel stories and plays, and mostly unpublished in his birth country for some time, which amidst the ongoing and increasing bloodlust under Putin makes Sorokin's zeal for wielding brutality, asynchrony, and putridity even more vital and, yes, more real. The more I read, the more surprised I felt to continue to be surprised, eventually giving up on trying to anticipate what might be coming next, and instead just hold on, laughing my ass off right there with him, as he poked me in the eye or shaked my pants. Now we were really having fun. Holy shit, fun in the face of horror. Holy shit, a soul that doesn't need to sell me it's a soul. Holy shit, an artist who refused to beg for understanding and who would trust me to know how to read and think on my own. I could go on, I won't go on. The deep subcontext of each story seemed to scream. An absolute antidote at last to the mind-numb aesthetic tedium and moral teething of so much modern fiction, fishing for our attention using the same mule feed they've been serving since long before we stopped being able to feel the wall of knives against our backs. If reading Sorokin hurts, it's because it must. If it feels funny, it's because it's not and never was. Because without a signal willing to buck off those who'd mime a brand out of bullshit to win a dime, what good is laughter, much less literature? What's left to lose when the only way to remind anybody what we're losing is to speak the language of the damned? And how much longer until there's not only nobody willing to listen, but to speak? The fourth wave of Sorokin is in the present, not yet the future, taking form within us now. And here we are together in this room where it is my duty to inform you, if not remind you, that this speech has been brought to you by the Cryo Bennings Corporation, a subdivision of Mattel Honda Disney Heinz. Under your chairs, you will find a blinding visor, which you should don at once in case of problems with the program. Once it has been installed on your forehead, please set your dials to polite applause and look ahead, and help me to welcome as best you can the world made flesh of one Vladimir Sorokin.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. You are here and we are here, and the spirit of literature with us, and we are saved. Well,
we're going to start with a reading, one of Vladimir's early stories that's coming out from NYRB in probably 5 years. But here it is. I think it was written sometime between 1979 and 1984. So it's a deep cut, but we're going to go straight in. So in Russian and English.
Okay.
It's called A Farewell.
Легкий прозрачный туман на востоке внезапно порозовел, прорезался желтой искрой, и через несколько быстро пролетевших минут край солнечного шара показался над кромкой леса. Константин встал с своего широкого трухлявого пня, низ которого так загадочно светился ночью, и, запахнув пальто, пошел к обрыву. Птицы, до этого коротко перекликавшиеся, запели громко, словно приветствуя солнечный восход. Константин подошел к поросшему осокой и кукушкиным льном обрыву, встал на самом краю. Широкая лента реки, обрамленная темно-зеленой массой камыша, лежала внизу.
A light, transparent fog in the east suddenly went pink, cut through by a yellow spark, and after a few quick minutes had flown by, the edge of the sun's sphere showed itself over the rim of the forest. Konstantin got up from his wide, rotten stump, the bottom of which glowed so mysteriously at night, then, having wrapped himself in his coat, set off toward the precipice. The birds, which had been calling out to each other concisely before this, began to sing louder, as if welcoming the sunrise. Konstantin walked over to the precipice, overgrown with sedge and cuckoo flax, and stood at its very edge. The river's wide ribbon, framed by a dark green mass of reeds, reposed down below.
Гладь ее была спокойна, ни ряби, ни признаков движения, только в зеленоватой глубине еле заметно колебались водоросли, походившие на загадочных существ. Константин достал портсигар, открыл. Папироса по-утреннему сухо треснула в его холодных пальцах. Он закурил. Дым папиросы показался мягким и некрепким. Глядя на выбирающееся из леса солнце, Константин улыбнулся, устало потер щеку. Все-таки как это невероятно тяжело уехать из родного места, с грустью думал он, из места, где ты вырос, где каждая тропинка, каждое дерево тебе знакомы. А я-то вчера бахвалился перед Зинаидой и Сергеем Ильичем. Уеду, мол, махну рукой, дальняя дорога, новые города, новые люди, чудак.
Its surface was untroubled, neither a ripple nor a single sign of movement. Only in its greenish depths did algae, resembling mysterious creatures, sway almost imperceptibly. Konstantin took out his cigarette case and opened it. A cigarette crackled between his cold fingers in dryly matinal fashion. He lit up. The cigarette smoke seemed soft and weak. Gazing at the sun emerging from the forest, Konstantin smiled and rubbed at his cheek wearily. Still, how incredibly difficult it is to leave one's native place, he thought sadly. The place where you grew up, where every path and every tree is known to you. And there I was, bragging with Zinaida and Sergei Ilyich yesterday. I'll leave, I say. I'll leave and wave my hand. A road to far-off places, new cities, new people. What a doofus I was.
Он стряхнул пепел, и крохотный серый цилиндрик полетел вниз, пропал в камышах. Середина реки всколыхнулась. Плеснула крупная рыба. Раз, другой, третий. А 3 расширяющихся круга пересеклись и побежали к берегам. Щука, наверное, ишь как кувыркалась. Даже хвост сверкнул. Наверное, килограмма 4 будет. Они тут меньше не попадаются. Он жадно затянулся, вспомнив, как в 10-летнем возрасте вытащил свою первую щуку. Это было таким же летним, безоблачным утром.
He shook off the ashes from his cigarettes, and a tiny gray cylinder flew downwards, then disappeared into the reeds. The middle of the river stirred. A sizable fish splashed up, once, then twice, then thrice. 3 expanding circles intersected, then headed for the shore. Probably a pike. Dang, what a somersault. Even its tail flashed up. It's probably around 4 kilos. Here you won't find one smaller than that. He took a greedy drag, recollecting how he'd pulled in his first pike at the age of 10. It was precisely the same sort of cloudless summer morning.
На реке никого не было. За долгое время ожидания не клюнула ни одна рыба. Он хотел было уже по совету старого рыбака деда Михея насадить на крючок кусочек тесьмы, на которой висел его медный нательный крестик, но вдруг поплавок исчез, леска со звоном чиркнула по воде, удилище выгнулось дугой, и началась борьба белобрысого, вихрастого паренька с невидимой рыбой, и он ее вытащил, мокрый, дрожащий от волнения, вытащил и бросил на песок, тогда еще не поросший камышом. Он снова затянулся и медленно выпустил дым через ноздри.
There was no one on the river, and not a single fish had bitten for the whole of a long spell of waiting. On the advice of his grandfather, Mihai, an old fisherman, he'd been about to sit a chunk of the braid from which his pectoral cross hung onto the hook. But the bobber suddenly vanished, the fishing line struck the water sharply, and made a sound, then the rod arched. Thus did a struggle between this flaxen-haired, mop-headed kid and an invisible fish begin. But he managed to pull it out. Sopping wet and shuddering with overexcitement, he pulled it out and threw it into the sand, which, back then, wasn't yet overgrown with reeds. He took another drag, then blew it out slowly through his nostrils.
Да, как все знакомо. Господи, ведь 37 лет я прожил здесь. Мальчишка я купался в ней и ловил рыбу, свесив босые ноги с того неприметного мостка. Юношей я любил сидеть здесь, читая книги о дальних странах, бесстрашных путешественниках, о любви. А потом полюбил и сам. Полюбил сильно, безумно, бесповоротно. И здесь, в этой березовой роще, впервые целовал свою любимую. Целовал в мягкие, взволнованные девичьи губы. Выбравшись из леса, солнце рассеяло остатки тумана и ярко сияло, слепя глаза. Ласточки кружились над рекой, стремительно касаясь воды и вновь взмывая.
Yes, how familiar it all is. Oh, Lord, I've lived here for 37 years. I swam here and caught fish as a boy, dangling my bare feet down from that inconspicuous little footbridge. I loved to sit here as a youth, reading books about far-off countries, fearless travelers, and love. Then I myself fell in love. I fell deeply, madly, irrevocably in love. And it was here in this birch grove that I first kissed my beloved, kissed her soft, excitedly girlish lips. The sun that clambered out of the forest dispelled the remnants of the fog and shone brightly, blinding him. Swallows circled up over the river, making hasty contact with its surface, then rising once more.
Стани они встречались вон там, возле 3 сросшихся берез. Встречались по вечерам, когда солнце заходило, оставляя над лесом алую полоску, а из деревни слышалась гармошка. Таня, милая Таня, с русой, туго заплетенной косой. Как любил он ее, стройную в легком ситцевом платьице с загорелыми, тонкими руками, от которых пахло сеном и луговыми цветами. Он целовал ее, прижимая к гладким, молодым березам, стволы которых и вечером были теплыми. Сначала она слабо отстранялась, а потом обнимала его и целовала. Неумело, нежно и смешно. «Ты похож на сокола», — часто говорила она, улыбаясь и гладя его по щеке.
He and Tanya would meet over there by the 3 birches that had grown together as one. They'd meet in the evenings when the sun had set, leaving only a scarlet strip above the forest, an accordion making itself heard from the village. Tanya, fair Tanya with her tightly woven blonde braid. How he'd loved her, slender Tanya in a light dress of printed cotton, with tan, delicate hands that smelled of hay and meadow flowers. He'd kiss her, pressing her against the smooth young birches, the trunks of which were warm even in the evening. First she'd pull away weakly, then embrace and kiss him, clumsily, tenderly, and in comical fashion. "You look like a falcon," she'd often say, smiling and stroking his cheek.
На сокола усмехался Константин. Значит, я пернатый? Не смейся, перебивала его она, не смейся. И добавляла быстрым, горячим шепотом. Я ведь люблю тебя, Костя. Все это было здесь. Константин бросил вниз недокуренную папиросу, взялся руками за отвороты пальто и вздохнул полной грудью. Прохладный утренний воздух пах рекой, дымком и пьянил необычайно. Так что же такое Родина? Подумал Константин, глядя на пробуждающийся, залитый солнцем лес, голубое небо и реку. Что мы подразумеваем под этим коротким словом? Страну, народ, государство. А может быть, босоногое детство с ореховой удочкой и банкой с карасями? Или вот эти березы? Или ту самую девушку с русой косой?
"I look like a falcon," Konstantin would grin. "Am I that feathery?" "Don't make fun," she'd interrupt him. "Don't make fun." Then would add in a quick, hot whisper, I really do love you, Kostya. All of that had once been, and it had been here. Konstantin dropped his unfinished cigarette, grabbed onto the lapels of his coat, and sighed with the whole of his chest. The chill matinal wind smelled of river and intoxicated him in extraordinary fashion. So what can one's motherland really be said to be? Konstantin thought, gazing at the awakening sun-drenched forest, the blue sky, and the river. What do we mean by this not-so-short word? A country, a people, a state? Or perhaps it's merely a barefoot childhood with a walnut fishing rod and a bucket of Crucian carp, or those birches over there, or that very same girl with the fair braid?
Он снова вздохнул. Пронизанный светом воздух быстро теплел. Ласточки кричали над прозрачной водой. Стояло яркое летнее утро, да-да-да, яркое летнее утро. Стояло, стоит и будет стоять. И никуда не денется. Ну и хуй с ним. Длинный, толстый, жилисто дрожащий, с бледным кольцом смегмы под бордовым венчиком головки, с фиолетовыми извивами толстой вены, с багровым шанкром, с пряным запахом.
It was a bright summer morning. Oh no, he sighed once more. The light permeated air was warming up quickly and the swallows were crying out over the transparent water. It was a bright summer morning. Yes, 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 a bright summer morning. That which was, that which is, and that which shall be. And it's not going anywhere. Well, it can suck a dick. A long one, a girthy one, veiny and trembling, with a pale ring of smegma neath the burgundy corolla of its glands, with the violet wriggles of its chubby veins, with the florid canker, and a slight gingerbread scent.
That's an uncomfortable story to read when you know what's going to happen. Do you remember where you were when you wrote that story?
It was long years ago. Ну, это было очень давно.
A long time ago.
Да. Это был еще Советский Союз.
It was, of course, during the Soviet Union.
Я был в андеграунде, московском андеграунде, молодым человеком и писал такие вот соцартистские истории.
I was, of course, a young man operating the Moscow underground, and I was writing these sort of soc art stories.
Собственно, они были такими, ну, бинарными бомбами, как бы, да?
They're what we might refer to as binary bombs.
Первая часть — это классический соцреализм.
The first part is classical socialist realism.
Ну, а в конце эти соцреалистические герои как бы сходили с ума.
At the end, it's as if these classical socialist realist heroes go insane.
Вот. Вот такая необычная литература была.
It was a sort of uncommon form of literature that I came up with.
Но это один из ранних рассказов.
That's one of my early stories.
Yeah, you like binary bomb. You like to like take the story, make them think they're going somewhere, and then and keep pushing them. Or like, who are you writing at in that moment? You know, like, are you writing for yourself? Are you writing to like knock something off the table, or what are you doing?
Ну, мой метод — это прежде всего удивить себя как читателя, собственно.
My method is, of course, to surprise myself as a reader first and foremost.
То есть, ну, хочется что-то сделать необычное, чтобы ты удивился сам. И я не думал о читателе, как бы, когда писал, но потом, естественно, если это нравилось одному, то находились и другие.
I wanted to make something out of the ordinary so that I surprised myself. I wasn't really thinking of readers when I was writing, but of course, naturally, if someone liked it, then eventually it found its way to other people who also liked it.
Но я могу сказать, что все книги разные, собственно, и вот метод этих бинарных бомб, собственно, это начало 80-х годов.
I can't say that all my books are different and that the binary bomb method is from my work from the beginning of the 80s.
Сейчас я уже делаю совсем другие литературные бомбы.
Now my literary bombs are entirely different.
So during that time, you're not really able to publish where you're living, right? You didn't publish early stories in Russia, and you were writing kind of in a closet almost. Is that true?
Да. Ну, это традиция советского андеграунда. Собственно, все хорошие русские писатели XX века, оказавшиеся в Советском Союзе, писали, что называется, в стол. Слово «андеграунд» появилось лишь в 60-е, 70-е годы.
So basically, well, this is the tradition of the Soviet underground. All the good Russian writers of the 20th century, all the good Russian writers of the 20th century in the Soviet Union wrote for what you might translate as around the table, the interlocutors around the table. And the word underground didn't even appear until the 70s and 80s. So it was, you weren't writing for...
Вот. Но если в сталинские времена писатели писали это и даже боялись почитать, ну, там, на квартире для знакомых, то в наше время уже была традиция домашних чтений.
Whereas during the Stalin era, people were afraid to even read it for other people in the apartment, in an apartment in a small circle. Well, in my time, other sorts of traditions and practices appeared, and we would read for other people.
Ну, и была уже идея напечататься на Западе.
And we already had the idea of getting ourselves published in the West.
Да, да.
Of course, your first publication was in the West, the Q.
Я
in
That's
France.
a good moment, because I read the Q, and in the jacket of the Q, there's a quote from you when it came out in 1985. I'd like to read back. You said your binary bombs have changed. I'm interested in multiple layers of this, but so in the jacket of the Q, they quoted you saying, "At the end of the 19th century, literature had great importance. Now this literature has become a monster. The Soviet writer is above all someone serious who must react to social problems. My position is that of one who gives himself over to the playful, the game of literature."
Окей. Ну, это the big tradition. Да. Ну, если вспомнить начало 20 века, да, вот русский литературный авангард, потом, собственно, Абериутов, ну, даже, собственно, Хлебникова, да, игровое начало это знак любого авангарда, собственно. И, безусловно, это было мне очень близко. И я во многом опирался на это.
If we're to recall the beginning of the 20th century, the Russian literary avant-garde like Aberyutov and Hlyebnikov, my beginnings, it seems it was a sign of love for my own love for the avant-garde tradition. Of course. Ну, также спрашивают о том, что значит для вас игра литературы. Ну,
это и есть, собственно.
Okay,
да,
so that's
да,
what for him the game of literature means.
Да, ну,
sort of this Russian avant-garde beginning of the 20th century tradition.
Собственно, я люблю смешивать серьезное и игровое. Но вот получается, по-моему, очень интересный жанр, как бы.
I like to mix up that which is serious and that which has to do with games, and in that way, I think a very interesting genre comes out of it, or very interesting genres come out of it.
Who are the players in the game of literature? And when you're, I mean, because you're writing a story, you're not thinking of the world, you're typing, you're reacting to the world you're in, and it does feel like a game to write. And so I wonder, Binary Bomb seems like a game move, and you, in your prose, it's clearly playful in a way that anything could happen at any time. And I wonder, I don't want to get too piecemeal with it, but I wonder about being in the moment of writing and feeling that moment and living in a moment of the tradition of avant-garde. What's pulling you there, and what, are you rebelling? Are you Just having fun? Are you saying fuck you to anything?
Блейк, ну, вы говорите о писательской кухне.
You're talking about the writer's kitchen, so to speak.
Yes, yes.
Это очень, ну, это очень тонкая вещь на самом деле, и есть в нашей профессии то, что мы не можем объяснить, как бы, да?
It's actually a very delicate thing in that which in our profession we can't really explain.
You know it very well. Yeah.
I'm trying to get you to tell me something.
Yeah. И я могу, конечно, тут долго говорить об этом, но что такое литература и искусство вообще, да? Вот мы находимся в МОМе, да? Как сказал Сальвадор Дали, я не знаю, что такое искусство, но я не могу без этого обойтись, да?
I can, of course, speak. I could, of course, speak for a long time about this, but the question really is, what is literature and art in general? We're in the MoMA right now, and as Salvador Dali said, I don't know what art is, but I can't get by without it.
Вот, собственно, ну, можно сказать, что литература — это наркотик, без которого мы не можем обойтись, и в который не только наркотик, но еще и некое лекарство от рутины жизни.
One might say that literature is a drug without which we can't get by, but it's not only a drug, it's also a kind of medicine against the routines of life. I think, yeah. I was going to say, I think that's a good possible explanation for the binary bomb without having to go into the writer's kitchen, that they offer a remedy against that routine because it explodes it. You know, like the beginning of that scene in the farewell that goes, a farewell, the story we read that goes on for such a long time. If you're a Russian person, you've read a lot of scenes like that, and I think even Western audiences feel the cliche in that. And so there's a sort of nausea that comes from it, and then when you explode it, it is that sort of medicine against routine and ordinary life. So I think even though Vladimir might not be able to articulate, we can say that the exploding it is a form of medicine.
Ну и в этот момент мы ощущаем освобождение и, собственно, мы забываем о рутине жизни.
At that moment, we can say that we feel liberation, we feel freed, and we forget about the routines of life.
It's the art, it's the literature.
I get what you're saying, and like, I would like to, I'll call out one of your literary tools that brings us towards this, which to me is gibberish. And I think gibberish is very rare in literature. And yet you employ gibberish in such an effective way. I almost feel like I'd love to hear you talk about gibberish, because for people who haven't read a lot of Sorokin, like you'll be in this moment where it's very traditional, and they're telling this, like, government people are speaking and they're about to have a moment, and then they just say something where you're like, what the, wait a minute, what is he talking about? And you think, you know, it feels kind of disorienting as a reader, because you're like, I'm not following the story. Is it because I don't know Russian history? Is it because of what? No, it's because he's fucking with you, and like, and it does have a balm. And so
a lot of people would text me that they were Googling non-existent terms from their four hearts, and they'd be like, where did you find these words? What is the Obstratron or the
Obtramon.
The Obtramon. I even forget.
Yeah, there's a great moment in the novel There Is Four Hearts where they're like making fun of Stalin and mainly saying Stalin didn't do a good enough job at what he wanted to do, but they're also they're like asking why Stalin failed or whatever, and they're like, is it fear or is it blah blah blah? And the guy's like, after a moment, he's like, it's Obtramon, and then it moves on. It never mentions Obtramon again. So, and I asked Max at dinner what Obtramon was, and he was like, "Oh my God, hold on a second." It's like you can't look up Obtramon. It's a word. So yeah, gibberish. Can we talk about gibberish as?
Да. Ну. Речь идет, собственно, о необычных словах, о фразах, языка, который понятен лишь героям романа. Но это бывает очень часто в нашей жизни, когда мы слышим на улице обрывки чужих фраз и понимаем, что это чужая жизнь, и она не всегда понятна нам, а иногда, собственно, и загадочна. Мне кажется, что это абсолютно нормально, вот. Но в романе «Сердца четырех» речь идет о необычных людях, собственно, которые совершают непонятные нам, но очень понятные им действия. И я даю эти слова как опознавательные знаки их внутреннего мира.
Yes.
I'm very sorry for my long...
Yeah, so basically we're talking about uncommon, so what we're talking about here is uncommon words or phrases of a language which is understood to the heroes of the novels and only to the heroes of the novels. But this actually happens very often in our actual lives when we hear snatches of other people's sentences or conversations. We understand that this is another person's life and that it's not always comprehensible to us. Sometimes it just remains absolutely mysterious. I think that's normal. But in the novel, Therefore Hearts, what we're talking about is not common people. They sort of perform these actions that we don't understand, but that they understand very well, and I offer them these words as a sign of recognition of their interior world. And I could add, as a translator, that when I was translating the book, I asked Vladimir a few times, Vladimir, what does this mean? I don't really know how to translate this. And he'd say, I'm sorry, Max, I don't know. It's the character's personal pun. You're gonna have to figure it out on your own.
Which is more realistic than realism, right? Like I think that's what really gets me about realism is that it's not realistic and it's like a bullshit version of realism, and like I think people react to extremity by saying that's not what I live, but like I wonder, especially coming from a tradition of Russian literature that's so traditional and so set in its ways, and I feel that in America, I wonder about how, well, I don't want to take it there. Yeah, is it merely to feel free to do that? It feels like to me a pushback at everything.
И то, и другое, на самом деле.
Both at the same time.
Да. Ну, вообще, мне кажется, что, собственно, каждый писатель старается создать свой мир убедительным, да?
Oh, okay. To put it generally, it seems to me that every writer attempts to convincingly create his own world.
Да. Но в сердцах 4, ну и не только, это есть и в Глобум Сале тоже. Речь идет о закрытом неком обществе, собственно, да. И я не должен раскрывать его. Я должен описать его, убедительно описать, чтобы люди поверили, что это существует.
Therefore Hearts, but not just Therefore Hearts, also perhaps Blue Lard. It's something else kind of at stake. We're dealing with these closed societies that I'm not responsible for opening up, but I need to describe and describe them convincingly to convey their reality.
И, собственно, это создает напряжение в тексте.
And essentially this creates a feeling of tension in the text.
Which in Blue Lard ends up being a huge shift in your life and career or as a writer. I wonder about because after Blue Lard you don't write for 10 years. Is that right?
After Therefore Hearts.
Before.
After Therefore
for
Hearts.
7.
Right.
Yeah.
What happens in the 10 years of silence there where you've kind of like been chasing this thing of blowing it back and I just wonder what held you together and what pushed you to keep. I mean, like Blue Lard is the one that blows it all up, so I'm curious about that time between, I guess.
Окей. Ну, вот после «Сердец» я 7 лет не писал романов. Была такая пауза, собственно, и они не получались, потому что время текло очень быстро, жизнь в России очень быстро менялась. И в такие времена, ну как и во времена войн, не пишется обычно проза. Она пишется после. И писателю надо уметь молчать, собственно. Вот это, конечно, сложно, но у меня получалось. Я занимался другими жанрами, там, писал пьесы, киносценарии. Роман — это вообще такое редкое и своенравное животное.
Yes. So after Therefore Hearts, I didn't write for 7 years. There was a kind of pause. Novels just weren't happening. Time was flowing very fast, and life in Russia was also changing very fast. At such times, just like in wartime, it's not really possible to write prose. Prose is written after, and of course, a writer needs to know how to shut up, which is difficult, of course, but I managed. I occupied myself with other genres, plays, screenplays. Novels are these sort of very particular and delicate animals.
Beast.
Yeah. Beast.
Extraordinary and very wild. Beast, yeah.
Is that what keeps you, like, is the spirit of finding the beast in where it appears, like, so you move away from novels, you do something else, like, it seems like there's a fortitude required or a rebuilding in that period that trying to place the right words for it. What's the impulse that brought, I mean, what brings you back finally, I guess, is a way to put it, to writing novels again?
Зачем писать? Зачем вы пишете?
It's the metaphysical question. Blake,
I've got metaphysical questions for you.
thank you very much. Да. Ну, потому что не получается не писать.
Because I don't manage not to write.
Вот, собственно, ну, я думаю, что это риторический, конечно, вопрос. Вот, на который невозможно дать ответ.
I think that is a rhetorical question which isn't actually possible to answer. Sorry, Blake.
No, that's what I want to hear, actually.
Just, любопытно, что ответил бы вам мистер Набоков?
It's interesting to think what Mr. Nabokov would have said to you about this, how he would have replied to you.
Could you guess what that would be? Could you synthesize that for us?
He wouldn't have said this.
Ну, можно пофантазировать, да.
One might fantasize, of course.
Yeah. I guess we should.
Should we do the
Reading, the
little?
next-
Yeah,
the
we've got
reading.
a tiny chunk of reading,
Yeah.
and then we have questions.
From another book.
Yeah, this is a tiny.
It's not
It's a taste of Telluria, we could say. I think. Just a little
The
poem.
last.
Telluria is, of course, not a binary bomb.
Yeah.
It's 50 chapters in different voices.
Questions before the second final?
Questions before. Okay, that's fine.
Let's do that.
So actually, we'll do questions before the second reading.
Ну, окей.
Word. You see when you want to shut up, Blake?
Oh.
I've got a lot too in Russian.
Yeah.
Lot of questions.
Yeah. Can't.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Here's one that'll be hard to answer. Can you talk about the violence within language itself? You seem to find it and make people see it.
Ну, да. Да, ну, ну, это, я думаю, что там Wittgenstein или французские философы XX века сказали бы, что любой язык — это насилие.
I think that Wittgenstein or a French philosopher of the 20th century would say that any language is violence. Is violence.
Вот, и, ну, я использую разные практики, иногда очень агрессивные, но дело в том, что, естественно, соцреализм — это тоталитарный язык насилия. Был.
Well, I use various practices, sometimes very aggressive ones, but the fact is that naturally socialist realism is was a totalitarian language of violence, and socialist realism is obviously the genre that's being parodied or destroyed in the early texts.
Но когда мы очень очарованы любой литературой и едем в метро и проезжаем собственную остановку, ну, это не насилие, разве нет?
But when we're very enchanted or caught up in any book or literature and riding in the subway, and we miss our own stop, I wouldn't say that that's violence, would you? Yeah.
I guess I can fuse a question I didn't get to and a question that's here, which I'm interested in what the use of plot is for you, but this particular question asks, is there randomness in your writing process? I guess, does plot, can we talk about the function of plot and randomness in the moment?
Большой вопрос, конечно.
Да, that's the big topic.
Big topic.
Да. Ну, я думаю, что есть разница.
Well, he thinks he thinks there is a difference. Good.
Nice.
I have another question. What are you reading?
Что вы читаете?
Reading. Сейчас как-то во времена этой ужасной и бессмысленной войны, развязанной Путиным в Украине, мне не пишется и не читается проза, надо сказать.
I've got to say that during this awful and senseless war started by Putin in Ukraine, I can neither read nor write.
Я читаю в основном сводки с фронта украинского и, собственно, разных людей, которые пишут об этой войне, собственно, политологов, военных экспертов, журналистов.
I read reports from the front and people writing about the war, political scientists, various experts.
Да, сейчас не очень вообще время художественной литературы.
Now really isn't the time for literature, for fiction.
Max, you want to ask some Russian
I'm trying to
questions?
find, there are a lot of them that have been asked, which they're not before, but when will Putin's war end? Which I think Vladimir has said before that he doesn't know. Not to be ironic. It's just what he said in the past 2 days. So we don't need to ask him that. It's a good question. I'm not trying to be mean. Someone asked about goida, which is the word in Day of the Oprichnik, which is, it was used in a speech by, some Russian hack. Yeah, okay, that guy. Someone just sent me the video, I don't know who it was. It's obviously, it comes from Eisenstein's movie about Ivan the Terrible, and it's a war cry used by the Oprichniks. It's unclear if it was an actual historical word. Obviously, Eisenstein didn't make it up, but it's really popularized in Vladimir's book. So someone asked about sort of what Vladimir's thoughts were about goida, which I think is interesting to mention. Vladimir, вы хотите что-то?
Это старое русское слово, это боевой клич опричников XVI века. Это одновременно и призыв к насилию и одобрение одновременно.
So it's an old Russian word, it's a battle cry. The Oprichniks of the 16th century used it ostensibly. It's simultaneously a call to violence and a sign of approval or emphasis.
Да. Лучше его не кричать.
Better not to shout it out.
Yeah.
We just do the reading, I think.
Okay, sure.
We had to push this down. Yeah, okay.
Да.
We'll just do the reading then, and
From Telluria.
leave on a high note with some American poetry.
Я тогда все прочту. Вот.
Да-да-да.
Я видел худшие умы своего поколения, вырванные Теллуром из черного безумия, умы, преодолевших повседневную трясину болота заурядной жизни, сбросивших со своих душ бетонную корку мещанской самоуверенности и тупого самодовольства, растоптавших в одночасье химер земной предопределенности, стряхнувших со своих глаз пепельно-мохнатую плесень усталости восприятия мира, раздробивших новыми руками своими липкую скорлупу депрессии, плюнувших горячей магмой полноценности в унылую морду тысячелетнего сплина, дохнувших новым дыханием жизни в пустые глазницы в пыльных библиотек, опустивших на ветер тысячи книг шизофренической безнадежности, доводящие читателей до психушки и самоубийства, забивших сверкающий теллуровый кол в могилу земной непрекаянности, сломавших хребет мрачному дракону человеческого разочарования в самом себе, восставших навсегда из пепла слабости предыдущих поколений и вознесших светящиеся тела свои на вершины новой реальности, разорвавших ржавые от крови, пота и слез цепи времени.
I saw the worst minds of my generation torn out of black madness by Telluria, minds who overcame the quotidian morass of the swamp of an ordinary life, who cast the concrete crust of idiotic self-assurance and dull complacency off from their souls, who trampled the chimera of earthly predestination in an instant, who shook the ashy, shaggy mold of tired perception of the world off from their eyes, who crushed the sticky shell of depression with their new hands, who spat the hot magma of consummateness into the dull face of thousand-year-old spleen, who breathed the new breath of life into the empty eye sockets of dusty libraries, who let thousands of schizophrenically hopeless books fall into the wind, books that had pushed readers either to suicide or the loony bin, who beat a shining tellurium stake into the grave of earthly despondency, who broke the backbone of the dismal dragon of humanity's disappointment in itself, who rose up from the ashes of previous generations' weakness and lifted their shining bodies up to the heights of a new reality and rent asunder the chains of time, rusty with blood, sweat, and tears.
Теллур, ты соскребаешь их останки блестящими руками с асфальта, с заблеванных мостовых, со стенок ванн. Ты лепишь их новые тела, здоровее прежних. Метампсихоз гниющих в могилах наркоманов, реинкарнации испепеленных солдат, воскресение съеденных собаками нищих, мощь возвращенной телесности, теллуровый колокол собирает вас, возвращение отлетевших душ, новые губы, новые глаза. Они смеются радостно и победно. Теллур возвратил их к жизни. Они обнимают нас. Мы вместе, смерти нет, мы веселы, сильны и счастливы. Мы обнимаемся с нашими мечтами. Мы дождались, мы отталкиваемся от плоской земли. Мы прыгаем, прыгаем, прыгаем вверх, вверх, вверх с грязного асфальта, с мостовых, из червивых склепов, из горящих домов, из моргов, из тюрем, из лагерей, из братских могил, из взорванных казарм, из неудавшихся биографий, из тошнотворных офисов, из искореженных танков, из отеля «Империал», из руин городов, из осточертевших вилл, из фитнесов и бассейнов, из кризиса самоидентичности, из-под обломков бетона и любви, из ресторанов и кинотеатров, из теплых семейных постелей вверх, 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 собранный теллуром, вверх, 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 к реальной надежде, к воссоединению с несбыточным, к родным и близким, к любимым, к запретно желанным, к невозможно обожаемым, к преступно лелеемым, к великим, к Моцарту и Платону, к Ницше и Достоевскому, к Будде и Христу, Мау и Гитлеру, к новым симбиозам, к победе над временем, к живым богам, к победе над смертью, вверх, на крыши, над улицами, над рекой, над радугой, вверх на облака. О, теллуровая катапульта, вверх, пламенным серафимам, к мудрым херувимам, к строгим ангелам, на престолы и господство, на силы и власти, вверх, вверх, вверх.
Tellurium, you scrape together their remains with shining hands, up from the asphalt, up from the vomit-covered paving stones, up from the sides of the tub. You sculpt together their new bodies. They're even more robust than their old bodies. The metempsychosis of drug addicts rotting in their graves, the reincarnation of incinerated soldiers, the resurrection of beggars devoured by dogs, the might of corporeality returned. The Tellurium bell has come to collect you. The return of departed souls, new lips, new eyes. They laugh joyfully and triumphantly. Tellurium has brought them back to life. They embrace us. We're together. There's no such thing as death. We're cheerful, strong, and happy. We embrace our dreams. The time has come. We push up off of the flat earth. We jump, 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 higher, 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 higher. Up from the filthy asphalt, from the paving stones, from wormy crypts, from burning houses, from morgues, from jails and concentration camps, from mass graves, from blown-up barracks, from biographies that didn't quite turn out, from nauseating offices, from mangled tanks, from the Hotel Imperial, from the ruins of cities, from exhausted villas, from gyms and swimming pools, from identity crises, from beneath the wreckage of love and concrete, from restaurants and cinemas, from warm family beds, higher and higher, gathered up by Tellurium, higher, 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 toward true hope, toward the coming into being of the chimerical, toward relatives and friends, toward lovers, toward forbidden desires, toward the impossibly adored, toward the criminally cherished, toward the great, toward Mozart and Plato, toward Nietzsche and Dostoevsky, toward Christ and Buddha, Mao and Hitler, toward new symbioses, toward the triumph over time, toward living gods, toward triumph over death, higher, onto the roofs, onto the streets, over the river, over the rainbow, higher, to the clouds. O telluric catapult, higher, toward fiery seraphim, toward wise cherubs, toward stern angels, to thrones and dominions, to powers and authorities, higher, higher, higher.
Great. Thank you all so much. Thank you, 92nd Street Y, for having us. Thank you to Vladimir Sorokin. Give me a round of applause.
Отлично.
Спасибо.